Hello! Today we're going to be going over how to calculate slope problems that are found in the Study Island lesson Slope under the Algebra 1. And I'm going to be showing you how you can do these problems on the calculator without having to use the pen or pencil on the TI-30XS multi-view calculator by Texas Instruments. So not all of the problems in this slope lesson in Study Island can be done this way, but there's a good chunk of them that can be. And it's always good to know how to do them on pencil and paper so that you can do them both ways and check yourself. And that way you know, maybe if you don't get the same answer, you can look for, okay, did I type it in right on the calculator, or maybe I made an error in the pencil and paper. But it's always good to be familiar with both ways. So the slope formula is subtracting the y's over subtracting the x's. And I always think it's a good idea to actually copy these down and label each of the coordinates x, y, x, y, so that you don't get the numbers confused. So if you have those coordinates copied down, labeled x, y, x, y, x numbers are always first and y numbers are always second in the coordinate, and you have this formula copied down, then it's easier to keep everything straight. The less you have to keep straight in your head, the less likely you are to make a mistake. But you can see this formula is a fraction. So I can use the fraction button, which is located right here, n over d, to substitute in and use the slope formula. So in the top of the fraction, I have y minus y. And so anytime you're doing substitution, it's always a good idea to use parentheses. So I'm going to take that first y value, 2, and put it in parentheses in the top. And then I'm going to have minus, and then I'm going to take my second y value, negative 2, and put that in parentheses, making sure to use the negative button when I mean the number is negative, and when using the minus button when the number is minus. Otherwise, I could confuse the calculator. So then I'm going to go to the bottom and do the same thing with my x values. I'm going to take my first x value, negative 2, and put that in parentheses on the bottom. And then that's going to be minus my second x value, which is 0. And I'm going to put that in parentheses on the bottom. And then I press enter, and there is my slope number, negative 2. So I know B is going to be my final answer. Now I'm looking at another problem, and this one here doesn't give us coordinates. However, I can pull coordinates off of this graph. And instead of counting rise over run, I can use the calculator and the formula to double check that work. So if I write down 2 coordinates from this graph, I'm going to be looking at for where the line crosses the corners of the grid paper. So right here it's touching the corners, and the coordinates of that point is negative 2, 3. And then I'm going to look for a point where it crosses in more corners, and here's another one, 2, 1. And like I said, it's always a good idea to label those x, y, so I don't get confused. And then I'm just going to use that fraction button in my formula to substitute those numbers in. So I press my fraction button, and I'm going to subtract my y values on top first, and my y values here are 3 and 1. So I'm going to have a 3 in parentheses minus a 1 in parentheses. Scroll down using the down arrow to the bottom, and there I'm going to subtract my x's, and my x values here are negative 2 and 2. So I'm going to type negative 2 in parentheses minus a positive 2 in parentheses, and I press enter, and then all simplifies down to negative 1/2. So letter D here is going to be my final answer. Number 3, it's a table, and I can still use my formula, x, y, subtracting the y's over subtracting the x's. It's just that when they give me a table, I only need 2 pairs and they give me 4. So I can pick any 2 pairs that I want. I just can't mismatch between pairs. So I'm just going to pick these first 2 pairs. And so I'm going to subtract my y numbers on the top. And I'm going to start with 6. You can start with 10, but then you just have to be consistent on the bottom. So since I'm starting with 6 on the top, I have to start with 0 on the bottom. I can't play around with the order. So I press my fraction button, and I'm going to do 6 minus 10 on the top for my y numbers. So I'm going to put a 6 in parentheses, make sure you remember those parentheses, minus a 10 in parentheses, and I scroll down, and now I'm going to subtract my x's on the bottom, and my x numbers here are 0 and 6. I have to follow the same order, so I'm going to put that first value 0 in parentheses, and then put my second number 6 in parentheses, making sure to subtract them in the middle, and I press enter, and that slope equals 2/3, which is going to be choice D. Now you can get some questions where you have to find out if the line is horizontal, vertical, or the slope's negative or positive. So if the line is horizontal, the slope is going to be 0. If the line is vertical, the slope is going to become undefined. So once again, if the line is horizontal, you're going to get an answer of 0. And if the line is a vertical that's undefined, it's going to tell you error on the calculator. It doesn't tell you undefined, it tells you error. So I'm just going to use my formula for these 2 points. Remember, write those points down and label them x, y, x, y. And so I'm going to use my formula once again. And so I'm going to press my fraction button, and I have my first y value is 9. I had to put that value in parentheses, and then I subtract it from the second y value, which is also 9. And so I put that 9 in parentheses, and I scroll down, and I'm going to put my x values subtracted on the bottom. So my first x value is -2, so I have to put that in parentheses, making sure to use the negative button and not the minus button. But here I press the minus button, and I subtract it from my second x value, which is 1, and I put that in parentheses. Always remember those parentheses. Press enter, and my answer here is 0, so that means it's going to be a horizontal line. If you go to ski a 0 slope, a horizontal line, that's going to be 0 fun. So that's one way to remember it. So here A would be my answer. Number 5 is very similar, just a little bit different numbers, but the same idea as if I get an error, that's going to be an undefined slope or a vertical line. And if I get the answer 0, that's going to be a horizontal. And if I get a number that's negative, that would be choice B. And if I get another number that's positive, that's going to be choice D. So I'm going to copy these points down and label them x, y, so I can keep that all straight, and then use my slope formula, y minus y and x minus x. So I go ahead and press my fraction button. And in the top of that fraction, I'm going to subtract my y values. My first y value is -3, so I'm going to put that -3 in parentheses, and then I subtract it, minus my second y value, which is -1, so I'm going to put that -1 in parentheses, arrow down to the bottom, where I'm going to have to subtract my x values. My first x value is 5, so I'm going to put that 5 in parentheses, then I'm going to subtract it from my second x value, which is also 5, so I put that 5 in parentheses, press enter, and here, that's where I get the error. I can't divide by 0, so that's why that slope is undefined, is because there's a 0 in the denominator. And so that means choice A here would be my final answer, because it's a undefined slope, so that makes it a vertical line. If you were to ski a vertical line, you could become undefined. It's because it's an undefined slope. So that's one way you could remember that one. So that's going to be all the problems for today. I hope that helps you out in that slope lesson in Study Island under Algebra 1. And I thank you for joining us today and listening.